It's day 39 of the 1 year fast. And today is a fasting day. This week, I fasted on Monday. I'm fasting again today, which is Wednesday, and I will fast again on Friday. The protocol for the 1 year fast is for me to fast for 3 days per week for 52 consecutive weeks, and we're in week 6. So today being a fasting day, been drinking my hydrogenated water. Again, not promoting, just I do love it. Also some electrolytes in the morning. I do take electrolytes during my fasting days, which made me think earlier today, should I be taking a vitamin during a fasting day? And doing a little bit of research, the recommendation is to take water-soluble vitamins during fasting days. So those such as C and B vitamins, and then during your non-fasting days, during your eating days, then take the fat-based vitamins such as vitamin D, vitamin A. So I might follow that process. So during my fasting days, think about taking those vitamins C and B, and then on non-fasting days, on those eating days, going for those fat-soluble vitamins such as A and D. So, it's quite curious when you think about how to align what you do on fasting days and non-fasting days. I did mention maybe about 2 weeks ago that I was going to try to do my weight-bearing exercises on a non-fasting day, so when I'm eating food, and then on fasting days to do more aerobics. But I've been thinking about this week. So this week I kind of broke that process. So this week I've been really kind of leaning towards doing more aerobic. It's almost like a compulsion to do aerobic exercise. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it seems to be just almost an innate compulsion to perform more aerobic exercise this week. Yesterday I was really spiked, and it was a non-fasting day, so I was eating and I was really driven to do aerobic exercise. So yesterday I performed no weight-bearing exercises. I just performed aerobics, although I did the sledge, and the sledge had some reasonable weight on top. So yeah, I'm definitely going to think more about, as this 1 year fast unfolds, what to do on fasting days, what not to do on fasting days. And that's definitely going to unravel as the whole year progresses. And I get those epiphany moments. So yeah, feeling good. Again, day 39. Been drinking water today. Later today, around about 10 o'clock, I'll break my fast and I'll have my plant-based protein powder with my spirulina. And then tomorrow it'll be a non-fasting day. Yeah, so just stepping into those moments of reverie again, and the purpose of those moments of reverie, moments of reflection are really just to try to gain some indicators around mental health, emotional health, psychological health, and potentially even spiritual health. And as that aligns with physical health of the 1 year fast, because fasting is much more than has much more than just a physical dimension. It has all of the emotions and the psychology and the mindfulness, and then the spiritual element comes into fasting. So thinking about a moment of reflection, today I was just reminiscing about employment. Now, I'm a strong believer that you don't ask anybody what they do for a living, because we all, by our nature, make assumptions when somebody tells you what they do for a living, which is really, really bad practice, in my opinion. But just thinking about what I've done over the years, I've had so many varying jobs. I would say over half my life I've been self-employed within my own business or businesses, but over 20 years I have been employed by employers. And I did mention in previous videos, my first full-time job was working as a commodity broker in London, just by Chiswell Street. And then I went, and that kind of covered some Spitalfields. And then after that, I went to work in Nine Elms, New Covent Garden. After that, I went to work for a company in Old Street doing Eurobond analysis. And so I mentioned all those jobs, and that was really early in my life. And then I moved away from London and just needed to find a new kind of reset button. And I went into Cambridgeshire and Lincolnshire, and I had so many different types of jobs. And I'm happy to kind of share those as the 52 weeks of the 1 year fast unfolds. And really there's a full spectrum there, definitely a full spectrum of colours on the different types of jobs I've had. And I sat down and calculated the number of jobs I've had working for other people. So again, most of my career has been self-employed, own businesses, but I've had 29 different jobs in just over 20 years working for other people. It probably shows, again, a lack of consistency on my part, which is probably one of my failings. And I was thinking about the time span of my positions working for companies, not self-employed, but working for other companies. And the longest I've ever worked for a single company beyond self-employment is 5.5 years. And that company was based in Connecticut, and they relocated to Tijuana in Mexico. And it's quite curious because although they relocated to Tijuana, still the vast majority of their business was conducted in the US. So all their sales were into US, some into Canada, minimal into Mexico. However, they moved their business, all of their business, from Connecticut into Tijuana. And then when I think about that, my second longest job was with a company based in New Jersey. And I was there for 3.5 years. And they did exactly the same. Well, not exactly the same, but the same concept. So they moved their business from New Jersey over to Hyderabad in India. But again, they retained most of their revenue from business in the US. So two of the longest companies I've ever worked for, 5.5 years, a company based in Connecticut, moved their business to Tijuana in Mexico, but still generated most of their revenue in the US and some in Canada, marginal within Mexico. And the second longest company I ever worked for was 3.5 years, and they moved their business from New Jersey over to Hyderabad, but still generated nearly all their revenue in the US. So that is, I guess, indicative of our current era. I guess there's some stories around that we could get into. But again, I calculated earlier, 29 jobs, 4 different companies over just 20 years. So less than one year per job on that basis. Again, pretty sad on my part. So it shows some inconsistency. But as I say, most of my career has been self-employed, my own businesses. And then as we think about my example, a very sad example, 29 jobs in just over 20 years, I wonder I'm very curious, I'm going to do some research on this. What is the average time the person actually remains in a job in the US in this era, and then compare that, maybe compare that decade by decade. So, in the 20s, in the 10s, in the noughties, in the 90s, in the 80s, and so on and so forth, maybe back to just post-Second World War. What is the average duration of employment for the average person, maybe not just in the US, but maybe we could say in individual countries across Europe, maybe across the world. It'd be really interesting to look at that. And I'm sure the trajectory would be on a downward gradient. It's actually really quite pertinent. The company that I worked for 5.5 years for, the longest time I've ever worked for a single company, I remember going into the boardroom and there's all these individuals around a table, and one of them said to me, "Oh yeah, I've been here for 24 years." I said, "Wow, that's really impressive." He goes, No, that's not the case, Alfie. I'm the new boy." So that particular company, virtually all employees would join and stay the duration of their career. So join maybe 16, 17, 18, or maybe after university, maybe about 22. And for the whole of that period of time up to retirement, whether that was 65 or 67, that 40 plus years, they would be based within that one company. And that was a really rare, I guess, example of, maybe that's a historical example of how things used to be. I would be amazed if there's many companies out there today that could boast of such a strong tenure within their workforce, or indeed actually having a philosophy, a strategy that keeps staff. Really, really interesting. And of course now, and I want to get into this as well, in terms of AI taking many, many roles. I've actually seen that. I've actually seen how AI is in 2026, and maybe even last year, actually taken on roles that would have been available to people. And as that trajectory continues, more and more use of agents, robots to manage workload, and less opportunity for us humans. What does that mean? Does that mean we're going to get to a place where truly there is marginal opportunity for employment? And does that dictate that we will go into a world of universal income? And so we're all going to kind of shift the way we operate from being employed, generating an income and then living our life, to a world where we are basically served a universal income, and then we have to budget the income to then match our needs. Of course, we're going to want to have basic needs, and 1 year fast, we're going to have some need for consumption. And I definitely want to come back to AI over the coming videos. And I'm sure during the course of the 1 year fast, as we get into 2027, there's going to be this exponential, rapid velocity in terms of growth of AI. So it's going to be curious, actually, the 1 year fast aligning with that. But just coming back to universal income, I'm definitely discerning. As I travel around the US, particularly, there's multiple apartment complexes just springing up all over the place. And typically they're close to major routes. And I'm seeing all these complexes, again, across the whole of the country as I travel, popping up all over the place. And they're not really occupied. And I'm kind of really curious to know what's going on there. And does that tie into universal income? Is there some agenda that the hoi polloi, the populace, the proletariat aren't aware of, that we're being managed into a place where when we get into universal income, we're going to be put into these apartments. We're going to be ordering our food via apps that maybe there's going to be delivered by robots and DoorDash, and we're going to be living in our apartments and maybe released into the light maybe 1 hour a day. It does seem very disconcerting when you look at some of the changes that are occurring. And if you read between the lines, probably incorrectly, but if then you read between the lines, it does seem a very potentially ominous future for us. Yeah. And again, the 1 year fast is going to end on the 20th of June, 2027. And I've got no doubt over the course of between the start of the 1 year fast and the end of the 1 year fast, there's going to be monumental changes in the way we operate and the way we live as human beings. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. Okay, so coming to the end of the day 39 of the 1 year fast, I'm going to have a workout. Again, I'm standard aerobic on the fasting days. I am going to make an effort to go weight bearing tomorrow during a non-fasting day. So once I get some regular food inside me, start to do that. Do some weights. Again, I do relatively light weights. In my mind, they're relatively heavy, but I know when I look around, they're not. They're light weights. So I do light weights, but I think it's important to do weight-bearing exercise, even on fasting days. So I'll be doing, but I'm going to do aerobics later today, and then when I break the fast later this evening, it's going to be my plant-based protein powder, some fruit, maybe an apricot, maybe some blueberries, and then also my spirulina, and then potentially I'll have some of my aronia berry juice, which I love, and then tomorrow step into a non-fasting day with regular food, and then my last fasting day for this week will be on Friday. And then it's kind of really shocking to think that next week is week 7 of the 1 year fast, and indeed tomorrow is day 40. Which is, wow, that's really seeing some progress. It hasn't, it's been so far enjoyable. I've actually enjoyed what I've done in terms of, up to day 39. I really enjoyed fasting, doing the 1 year fast, fasting for 3 days per week for 52 consecutive weeks. And I actually genuinely believe that I can, of course, God willing, that I don't kill over. I honestly believe that I can, if I've given the opportunity, persist with a 1 year fast and do 3 days fasting per week for 52 weeks and get to that June 20th, 2027 with some fanfare, and then step in the day after into the summer solstice. I love that day, summer solstice, love it. Okay, so that's me for day 39. And yeah, day 40 tomorrow. I'll see you then. Thank you.